She's getting her notes together. We have no dues or fees, and we put them in this basket.
Shuffle, 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 shuffle. You ready for me? No, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm an alcoholic. My name's Barbara. Thank you very much. But I'll answer to anything. Thanks. It's such an honor to speak at the Seattle group #1. Makes me feel old and wrinkly. Oh, wait, I am old and wrinkly. Anyway, I got sober April 1st, 1984, when I was 26 this time. So I haven't drank yet since then. So I've been sober 37 years and I'm plenty old. So anyway, but so I was an alcoholic kid. And so that's sort of my story. Wait, you know, when people talk about that there's like stages of alcoholism, like there's a stage when it's working, when alcoholism is working, and then there's a stage when there's some problems, but it's still working, and then there's just all problems. Like the phase where it was working for me was junior high school. You know, it's like, but you know, so, and I'm just going to say what my story is like because, and not everybody's story is the same. We have different upbringings, we have different backgrounds, we have different drinking styles. And so, you know, if you don't identify, if you're new and you don't identify with the kind of alcoholic I was or am, you know, what they said is just keep coming back till you hear your story. You know, keep coming back till you hear your story. And so in my story, my family was alcoholic before I took a drink. Before I ever took a drink, there was violence and other stuff going on in my home. My dad was alcoholic, who died when I was in 3rd grade of alcoholism. He was 42. He died in an alcoholic seizure. And then when I was in 6th grade, my oldest sister got married to a thief and drug dealer. And so he brought stolen goods and drugs into my home. And they moved into the room upstairs, and we had big quantities of drugs and stolen goods in the home. And so, you know, I had to make money. So, you know, they were packaged for distribution. And so I became a little drug dealer in junior high school. And, you know, at the time I thought that was very cool. You know, yeah, I mean, it sort of and plus I had thugs for older brothers and sisters. And so it sort of established my role in school. But what also happened is alcoholism was happening. And so as soon as you know, it's like I had been the kind of kid that I actually kind of liked school because my home life was so chaotic from the alcoholism that I liked school. I liked to get away from my home to go to school. And I could kind of start making my own way there. But when I started drinking and using drugs, it's like, I think of it like this veil came down between me and other people. And I no longer wanted people to be able to see inside of me. I didn't want people to see what was happening. I didn't want people to see how I was feeling. And the Big Book talks about the alcoholic leads a double life. And I started leading that life in like 6th grade, you know, where I didn't want my classmates to see what anything that was going on. And you know, I started, my grand sponsor talks about what we give up for the drink, right? And so like what we slide across the bar, that's the way she puts it. She slides it across the bar. And so for me, I slid across the bar my grades, you know, I slid across the bar my interests, any other interests I had, you know, in music or in sports or in art, all that stuff, I gave up for drink. And so that by the time I was actually in high school, nothing else was there but me and the alcohol. I'd even given up the other drugs, you know. So it was just a really quick progression. A couple things, like, and my home life was chaotic. And there's a place in one of the chapters, I forget which chapter it is, where they talk about it's either working with others or the family afterwards, something like that, where they talk about the alcoholic home can be this chaotic, the phone will ring at all times of the night. There might be a burned mattress. I was like, that was my home life. Because so there, the instance that stands out for me that describes the chaos of my home is my older brother, used to like to bring hitchhikers home and feed them. And that was his Good Samaritan act. And so these folks, these guys would add to the diversity of our clientele for truck distribution, you might say. But this particular guy was, he had his own drug. He had a prescription for barbiturates, which my brother really liked. Um, but he also turned out to be what we then used to call a pyromaniac. And so he got my brother all barbed out and passed out in his bed. And then he started setting our house on fire. And he went around and put straw even under my brother's bed and set his bed on fire. And then went and woke up my mom to Mrs. G, your house is on fire. And so she frantically went around and tried to put the house out and dragged my brother out and his mattress out. And where was her 16-year-old daughter? She didn't know where I was. And, where I was I was passed out in the car in the driveway, but she didn't know that. And, the sirens, when they came, they didn't have their sirens on. It was just the fire engine with their lights. And so I didn't wake up. I had been mad at a boyfriend and I had gotten my brother to buy me some beer and I had passed out in the car. And when I woke up the next morning and I came out and there was this burned mattress on the grass, and I was like, what happened here? And I come in and my mom is like, she's like, where have you been? So when I made my amends to her, I had to make amends for that. That, she didn't know where her 16-year-old daughter was at night, and adding to her troubles that she had in that home. So anyway, so by the time I got to the other thing that happened in junior high school, and this plays a role in my story later, is that I was trying to get away. I think it was a form of geographic that. We talk about trying to get away from our drinking, and I was trying to get away from my family, kind of. It's like I started going to Mexico with my Spanish teacher in junior high school. I went when I was 14 in the summertime, and then when I was 15. And what I experienced there was so stark difference to what my life was. I mean, I met really kind people that were really good people and were very kind to me and respectful, and it made a huge difference in my life. It showed me that there was good in the world in a way. And then I went back to my home and there was a lot of immorality going on. All sorts of things happen when you take drugs and alcohol and dump it on a group of people. And so I was confused by all of that, and I didn't know how to process it. And so I just closed in on myself. It's like I just withdrew. I withdrew from school. I withdrew from friends. I didn't have really. It's like I just wanted to drink, and I barely graduated from high school. I got into a special program in 12th grade because I was flunking out. And I mean, I'd gone from being a pretty good student to pretty much flunking out. And but I did manage to graduate, and I just went down, and it's like I had alcoholic seizures, I had blackouts, I had a lot of the late stage of alcoholism, the symptoms that we see in people that drank for years and years and years. I experienced, I think I had my first alcoholic seizure in ninth grade, and my primary purpose when I was like 15 was to be cool. And I'll tell you what, grand mal seizures are not cool. I was like, well, that didn't happen. It must be the pot. I quit smoking pot when I was 15 because I was sure that, anyway. So that just continued. And I had, eventually I had a girlfriend that I had moved to Montana to, again, escape my family, escape, it was a geographic, and um, we became drinking partners. And she is still my friend today. And she ended up 12-stepping me at some point, even though, so she was always trying to quit drinking, which was not convenient for me since she was my drinking partner. And um, she came to visit me one time in Seattle. I'd moved back to Seattle, and she was afraid that I was going to die because I had a really bad car wreck, and I woke up in the car, and I was in my mother's driveway, and the car was all smashed, and my face was smashed because I'd hit the steering wheel, but we never found what it was that I hit with that car. My boyfriend was knocking on the window. He's like, "What happened? What happened?" And we took all the different routes I could have taken from the bar that night, and we never found what it was that I hit. Which really it scared me. And so my girlfriend was afraid that I was going to die, and so she came and she was going to AA. She didn't say go to AA. She just said, "I don't want to watch you die, and would you please try to quit drinking?" And I was like, okay. Since it was her, and since she knew what we drank like, I said I would do it. I would give it my best shot, and I did. I quit drinking, and I went to AA and didn't like it, didn't like all the old guys talking about Jesus or whatever. I thought that's what it was. And so I just decided to do it my way. And my way meant going out of state to go to school. And I followed my friend to this little college down in California. And then started taking drugs because I was so anxious all the time, and it just required um, blowing my brains out on the weekends, not with a gun, but with drugs. And but I would have to wake up to myself in the morning, and that's what happened. But I wanted to go to this little college because it was going to send me back to Mexico to study, and so I did that the second year, and but I had untreated alcoholism, what they call untreated alcoholism. So the big book calls it being restless, irritable, and discontent. And that's the way I was: restless, irritable, and discontent all the time. And I thought that it was just because the world was so messed up, and that I didn't know anything about alcoholism. I didn't know anything about alcoholism. And so I got into this situation in Mexico where we were in these little villages and stuff, and I was in this little village, and they were so careful with us that they would always, the family I was staying with would always have a kid watching out for me. So I was never by myself, so I couldn't get high, and so I was clean and sober against my will. It's like I was by circumstance, and it was not a good scene inside. This untreated alcoholism was just like, I didn't know what I was doing there. I didn't know what, and I just kind of had a nervous breakdown. And we had a reunion of all the students from all the different villages, and in this party at this retreat center, and a bottle got put in front of me. And it's so funny because I think of I had not drank in front of all these other students. We'd been in school together for a year, and they had never seen me drink. And I said to this one gal, I'm an alcoholic. I can't drink. And so if you ever see me going for a drink, remind me that I'm an alcoholic. And so this bottle got put in front of me, and she saw the look in my face, and she's like, Barbara, don't forget you're an alcoholic. And it's like, without even thinking, I manipulated her. I was like, what, you won't like me if I drink? And she's like, oh, no, I didn't mean that. And I was like, well, got that out of the way, and I was like, glug, glug, glug. And it had been 2 years since I had drank. And, what I woke up to was really not pretty at all. And it's not normal to drink like that, but I didn't know what my problem still was. I didn't know what my problem was. And So a week later, we had another party, and I was like, okay, last time I got really drunk. This time I'm only going to have 4 drinks. I love that. I don't know why I thought that. I didn't say 1 drink. You know, it had been 2 years, a long 2 years, you know, and I was like, I'll only have 4 drinks, and and I did. I only had 4 drinks, and I was like, okay, that's it. See, I can control it. And I remember I was on this staircase. I remember this, and I was on the staircase, and I said this to myself. See, I can control it. And just then, I remembered something I had heard in an AA meeting, and they said this guy had said that if you're alcoholic, that the day will come that your thinking will lie to you and will tell you you can control it. I was like, oh my God, that just happened. You know, it freaked me out. It freaked me out because it showed me that I was in trouble, that I was in big trouble. Because I am, like I've heard someone say, I'm not the kind of person that should drink. I'm just, I'm not. And so it freaked me out. And when I got back to the United States, I went to AA, and I was in Marin County, California at the time. And so, and that was April of 1984, and the people there looked very shiny and happy, and I was not. I had been hanging out with, you know, you know, a lot of. I was had been hanging out on the outskirts of society since I had been a kid, really, and I hadn't been in mainstream America, and I didn't know how to behave. I didn't know how to socialize. I didn't know how to go to coffee with you all. I didn't want to do any of that. I didn't want to do it. I didn't trust anybody in AA. I was not your huggable newcomer. You know, I was really hostile, actually, and angry. And uh, I would come to the meetings late and leave early. And, you know, it's like I had, you know, like the ripped t-shirt, spiky hair thing, and, you know, and people were really kind to me. You know, again, it's not really criticism that gets me, that hooks me. It's kindness. And like I remember there was this guy who, Big Mike, who I got a commitment at setting up chairs at this meeting, and I would go smoke, you know, set up the chairs and then go smoke until the meeting started. And he'd be out there, and he could see I didn't want to hug, and he'd be like, keep coming back, you know, this big guy, and just was kind, you know. There was a space for me here. And so I heard a lot of speaker meetings. This was a speaker meeting that my commitment was at. And I heard people talking about their alcoholism, and it shocked me because this was all stuff that I did not want to think about, or that I hadn't thought about. Um, and I started watching what people did. So I came around for 6 months before I got a sponsor, and I watched people, because where I grew up, that's what I did. I watched people because it wasn't safe, you know? And so I watched you all, and I saw people doing things that I had never seen before. I saw people doing things like helping others anonymously. That was a big thing where I got sober, and I would hear about it from somebody else. Like I would hear about like a guy that took a fully dressed, you know, and cooked turkey to some single mom who was unemployed and left it for her anonymously. Or I heard about them, you know, it's like putting up people on their couch when they wanted to get sober, or just doing things for others. And I had never been around people like that. I mean, that's just not my orientation. And I started to think that maybe, you know, there was something here that could help me. And so I decided to risk all and get a sponsor. And um, and this woman could see that I needed a sponsor, but I didn't want her to be my sponsor because I didn't like her. But I didn't like most people, so she said she had a friend who, you know, had one of her sponsees had drank, so she had time for another sponsee, and she had 5 years sobriety, and she thought I should ask her to sponsor me, and so I did. And I went to coffee with this woman who I didn't know, didn't like particularly. People say pick someone who has what you want. Well, the thing she had was sober. She was sober and had worked the steps. That's it. And we went to coffee, and I sat across from this woman, and I realized with a shock that I was going to have to start telling the truth to this woman to save my life. And because that's what they said, it's like we have to be honest to stay sober. And I knew I didn't have any idea how to do that, but this is where it was going to happen, because I couldn't talk in AA meetings. I didn't want to talk in AA meetings. And so I had to learn how to talk to one person. That was my sponsor. And so we went through the first 2 steps sitting down over coffee that day. She asked me, she told me her story, asked me, what happened when I drank. And I said, not good things. Not good things happen when I drink. And she's like, what happens when you don't drink? And I said, I go crazy and then I drink. And she's like, okay, check, and she said, do you have any kind of a higher power? And I said to her, I think there might be something in nature, in the wind or in trees, but not so sure about people. And she said, that's good enough. She said, do you think that power can help you? And I said, I think it's going to take a higher power to help me, because I'd just been carrying so much for so long. And she said, okay, do you want to make an appointment to do the 3rd step? And I was like, okay. And more than anything, right? And so we did. A week later, and I was supposed to read the chapter of the agnostics, which I did, but I did not want to do the 3rd step. I knew I needed to do a 4th and 5th step, because they said that we'd drink if you didn't do a 4th and 5th step. But I knew I had to get through the 3rd step to do the 4th step. I felt like it was this ring of fire I had to jump through. I did not want to turn my will and life over to nothing, and didn't know anything about a higher power. I didn't want to give up anything to it. And but I knew I had to do it. So I went to her house and said, do you want to get on your knees or sit? I'm like, I'll sit. And she's like, that's fine. And we read through the book about that part, and I read the 3rd step, and I had a friggin' spiritual experience. It was just very unexpected. And it was just this pinpoint of light that pierced my thoughts. And it was just pure love. And it was interested in me. And the movie Lord of the Rings, when the guy puts on the ring and the bad power can see him all of a sudden? It's like that, only really good. It was like that, only the good version. It's like all of a sudden God could see me, or I could see it, or something. And I freaked me out completely, because I was this cool little chick, right? And that was like freaky experience. And so anyway, I'll never forget it. And so I went on to work the rest of the steps, and the rest is history. And I went and made amends to those people that I'd harmed, to the guy who, that was knocking on my window that day in my car, and to my mom, and to my, all these people. And even, it took me 4 years to make one amends. It was that guy's brother who had given me a black eye, that I provoked him. And so I had to go make amends to him, even though he gave me the black eye. And that was great. It took me 4 years to do that one. That was the one I was never going to do. But so if you're new, there's a couple of things that I just want to encourage people to really not let themselves miss in sobriety that AA provides. Like, one is a sponsor. There's no, I had to sit down with that person and learn how to tell the truth. Another one is fellowship. I became so antisocial in my alcoholism. I became so afraid of people. And, the fellowship will save us when the higher power doesn't seem close, I'm thinking of a time when, and you know, we can do anything we want in sobriety as long as we're willing to do certain things. Take AA with us, we can do anything. So one of the things that I wanted to do was I went and immersed in Spanish. I went to South America and lived in South America for a little while. And so I was in this place where I looked really different than them. And and I felt very different and didn't feel part of, and which I can feel that way anywhere, right? And then you put the cultural and physical differences and stuff. And so I went to this Alana club, or they don't have Alana clubs, but they went to this hall where they had meetings, and there was this guy there, and it was a meeting, and I shared about how I felt different, you know, or not different, but that I felt out of place and felt, you know, that there's a place in the book that talks about where we restless apartness or anxious apartness. And there was a guy in the meeting, and he had, you know, like a kind of a broken nose, and some of his teeth were missing. And I was like, oh, he's a new guy. And so I was, you know, carrying the message, you know. And he comes up to me after the meeting, and he said, and it turns out he has 2 years. He had 2 years sobriety. And he said, hey, you know, why don't I show you around town? And I was like, that'd be great. And so we spent the day together. He showed me all around town of La Paz, Bolivia, and introduced me to all these women who were street vendors who were in AA. And I would never have known that, you know, buying their wares and stuff, that they were in AA. And so he introduced me. And by the time that day was done, I was a part of that community. They were like, they had already heard about me, you know, because at that time, at that time I had like 17 years sobriety or something. And they had heard there was this foreigner that with all this sobriety. And they were like, oh, you're that woman, you know, can I have your phone number, you know? And I ended up sponsoring a couple of those women. And while I was there, you know, and I'm still in contact with some of those folks, you know, and it completely changed my experience of that trip, you know. And so that's what I mean by, you know, it's like, don't let yourself miss. I would have missed that, you know. And so don't let yourself miss that. And don't forget about the steps, you know, because that's the change from the inside out. And that's absolutely what we need, you know, what I needed to have that change. Um, and then also reaching out to newcomers, you know, reaching out to newcomers. I just want to just encourage people to do that. We were encouraged to do that when we were very new. You know, like as soon as I have a couple of days, I'm supposed to be giving my number out to somebody else who's walking in the door with one day. And I didn't want to do that. I was like, why would I want to give my number out to these strangers? I don't want them calling me. You know, it's like, that's the way I felt about it. And, but you know what? You do want them calling you. Actually, you do. And there was a time when I had had all this loss in sobriety. I had had a number of family members die. And then I met this guy. We decided to get married, and we got married, and then he died. And so I had all this loss, and I was pretty wrecked by it. And I got this sponsor, and there's another good reason to have a sponsor. And she was like, well, Barbara, you're not working right now. You can go to 5 meetings a week and get the numbers of the newcomers at that group, at those meetings. And I was like, no, I don't think so. And she's like, yeah, just do it. Just do it. And so I did. I went to meetings, and I got not the men's newcomers, but the women newcomers phone numbers, and I would call them. I was supposed to call them the next day. And it's the last thing I wanted to do. And I did that. And it was the best part of my day. It was the best part of my day. And they were always surprised, because usually they don't get the call, right? But just don't let yourself, I would have definitely missed that. That's not what I would have chosen. And so don't let yourself miss that. And every once in a while, you know, someone will ask you to sponsor them, and you'll get to have this amazing experience of sharing sobriety with people, sharing this road, this sober road. And it's a remarkable experience. It's remarkable to watch people come in wrecked and get healed and just flourish. You know, to watch that happen is such an honor. I just went to a service today for a woman I used to sponsor, when she lived here in Seattle. And, you know, she just, it was such an honor to have been with her through the trudges of, and the, you know, the, ditches that we have to slog through in our step work, and watch her escape alcoholism and succeed the way that she had in her life. And she had been living in California now for over 10 years, and it was just such an honor to be able to have shared that part of her recovery. And so don't let yourself miss that. And all we have is each other and this program and the higher power. And honestly, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I feel so fortunate to have escaped disaster with you all. And so anyway, I think I'm out of time. And thank you very much for this opportunity.